Hi everyone, here we are on our second episode of Move for a Movement, and I'm so glad to be joined by Ellice Patterson, who is the founder, director, artistic, and executive director of Abilities Dance Boston. She's got some exciting things coming up, so we'll talk about that, but she's doing amazing work. Hello, thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Of course. Yeah, so I've talked with you about a little bit personally. Your company has such an interesting and meaningful origin story. Do you want to just tell our listeners why you started the company and how that all came about?
So I am a dancer and I am a disabled dancer, and I wasn't finding spaces for me in the Boston area, accessibility-wise, or just having that knowledge and competency needed for me to be able to work or learn, and so I created it. And into Abilities Dance, and it's been going since our first show 3 years ago, and it's just been movement and grooving ever since.
That's amazing. Yeah, it makes me think of that. I feel like I've even seen you post it on social media, like if there's not a seat for you at the table, like bring your own chair, make your own, something like that. And I've also seen if there's not a seat for you at the table, don't fight people for seats, fight together and demand a bigger table. And I feel like you do both, right? You've made your own space, but you also do the advocacy work through your company and through other things you do to make that table bigger for more sorts of people in dance and everywhere.
Yeah, it's needed. I think when there are enough of us with identities, not just in the disability community, but throughout, able to really have a more diverse and better equipped dance table, so to speak, so that everyone can participate in some form.
Yeah. Do you want to speak to that a little bit about in terms of creative process, in terms of auditioning, how you really realize, you manifest that vision of a company that is for everyone, literally for everyone, no matter what your abilities, etc. are?
Yeah. Well, audition-wise, there hasn't really been a formal process for a couple of years now. I started with just like an open dance call where anyone can kind of submit videos of themselves moving. But from there, it's just kind of been like social media or seeing someone in a class, being able to kind of see people in their own spaces has been really helpful to kind of knowing what their movement style, what their personality is, and being able to assess from there. Because I find like the traditional audition process not feasible because you don't know what movement range someone might have, or if they're able to process quickly choreography in that moment, and instead being able to provide a platform where people can kind of present what they are through social media, through seeing them in other spaces, and then you can kind of assess from there. So you're seeing them at their best self instead of what you think their best self might be.
Right, and how that best self might fit into like an hour audition when I feel like so nervous and like what are like that's it. I think a lot of companies are moving to that model a little bit. Like it's the people you know, it's the connections you make. It's class, right? It's showing how hard of a worker you are, which I think, arguably, that's a better way to assess who a dancer is, right, and how they're going to work with you. So that's awesome. I think also what's really interesting about what you do is this accessible design principle, which I've worked with you a little bit on. For instance, having all pieces narrated in a sense, or having those, I don't think I'm using the right terminology, having those access points for instance, with audio recordings, describing what's going on with the movement for people who might be low vision, right? So could you speak to that a little bit about how you make that, how this principle of accessible design fits into what you do?
Yeah, so we use audio descriptions to have that access point for any blind or low vision audience member. and it's really typing these words that are explaining the movement so that you're able to have that sense. And they're also put over the music or live narrated so that everyone's experiencing as close to the same thing as possible. And the biggest part for me is that they're edited by someone from the community, so it's not that I am assuming what needs to be said or read, but that someone is vetting that, so we are being as mindful as we need to be.
Yeah, and as someone who's been involved in that process, that feedback is so important, right? Because I could see the necessary changes that we ended up making, right? So that's awesome. How is that received? Like, how on the audience end, how have you found, like, have you had people that were from that community that were so grateful? Could you describe any of those instances, or just overall, yeah, how does that end up, right, on the on the audience end?
Yeah, I think it's been great that we're having that access point and that people are really able to utilize that and have gotten positive reviews that way. I think also taking into account other aspects where we noticed that the audio levels were off, and so it was harder to understand at some point. So we made those edits for the next show. So being able to really involve them in that feedback process as well is super critical. And then on the other hand, non-disabled audiences or audiences that aren't in the blind low vision community have appreciated it too, because you know, you might not be able to see everything from where you are, but at least you can hear what's happening, or you might be able to just kind of sit back and process in that way, as opposed to just like staring at this like heavily lit stage for you know, hour, 2 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it works against this zero-sum principle of, like, if we're offering these people who might be traditionally marginalized and, you know, these spaces aren't accessible, if we open it up to them, well, these people who've always been there, they lose something. Well, no, right? You've seen that all audience members appreciate that access point being there. It's just kind of, interestingly, for anyone, it's another dimension to the performance, right? That you could work in artistic ways, which I've seen your company do. So that's so cool. Yeah, and you just got a new position. Tell us about BalletRox, which you'll be working with.
Yeah, so BalletRox is a dance school that teaches all ages of youth, so like 18 and under, and through their 2 programs of both working in their own studio and providing after-school classes, but also working with Boston Public Schools and providing classes in school with their teaching artists, so that the students are able to participate in that way as well.
Right, and those opportunities are so meaningful, right? To have art. Is it in Roxbury, Mass? Or?
Actually, in JB, yeah, as part of the spontaneous celebrations building. So it's great to be able to be in the community and be able to work with so many different aspects of youth, both in school and outside of school in our space, and to be able to connect and dance in that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. So many areas, neighborhoods of Boston are gentrifying so rapidly. But to have that space where it's like, no matter what your skin color, what your, you know, socioeconomic background is, like, we're all going to come together and dance. And if there are tensions, like, you can address those, and kids can, like, it's hard to hate up close, right? So to have all types of people coming together in those spaces, that's a beautiful thing, right? I'm always all for that. Yeah, so what's next for your company? What do you envision BalletRox? What's next?
BalletRox conversations that I've been having with the board prior to starting is that really thinking about how can we make this space a home for every child and family of that child, and so having an even stronger racial equity lens, intersectional racial equity lens, so that we're continuing to serve everyone and be committed to the work both in trainings and thinking of an accessible education model, and all these different ways that we can better serve every child in our community and then continue and bringing even more children in, that we might be missing. And then with abilities, a whole lot. There are different community programs we're going to be starting up with new partners this year and continuing with partners like our Space or Place, which is an after-school program for blind, low vision youth in Boston Public Schools. We are going to be partnering virtually with the University in Sri Lanka and building out this virtual performance with some of our dancers and some of their students, and really talking about disability culture in America and Sri Lanka, and starting a ballet too. So we'll be building a ballet this year and premiering it hopefully in the spring of next year, 2021. So fingers crossed.
That's amazing. International connections. What?
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yeah. Awesome, awesome. That reminds me, I did mean to ask before, but representation, right? So another really powerful thing to me about your company is just the diversity, inclusion, the intersectionality within your company. Can you speak to that of, you know, like we were talking before on the two ends of what it means for the dancers, right? People included, and then also what it means for audience members. Could you speak to that?
Yeah, it's very important to have all of these different identities represented in the company so that we're able to have really engaging conversations in our work. We're able to think of how to best include our identities within our movement so that we're really representing ourselves and our best selves on stage. And with audiences, I think they kind of see some of that and they're able to see representation that they might not have seen on the Boston stage and either see themselves or learn from that if it's not seeing themselves, and kind of seeing this whole connecting on these really human values.
Yeah, yeah. Just, yeah, the power of, you know, seeing how something is possible for you when you otherwise that might not have been in your universe. You know, that's amazing. So I also love to ask company directors about COVID. So fun. How are you dealing, right? What kind of innovative ways have you made it work, essentially, right, through this crazy time that's so challenging for our industry?
With abilities, we're going to start having live stream performances in theaters, so there will be audiences and we'll be socially distanced and dancing with masks on. So that's a way to kind of have performances where it's not just in our living rooms, but in settings where the work can really be shown on a different level. Prior to that, we've been kind of having virtual rehearsals and classes even before COVID, so that hasn't been a change. It's been more so just figuring out how we can have these events that can still reach people and that can really show our best selves and continue thinking of ways to keep doing that work.
Yay! So just to make sure I'm clear, those performances it's going to be performed on stage, but you're also going to be streaming it?
Yes.
So both.
One will be live streamed and another will be recorded later for audiences to see. But yeah, they'll be in the theaters themselves with no audience, so that we can keep everyone safe as possible and be able to still do the work that we love doing.
Yeah, so some people can access it in that theater environment that, you know, it's like nothing like that, right? Seeing it live, that ephemerality. And others seeing it later so they have a chance to view it if they don't feel as safe, they're more of an at-risk population. That's a really interesting hybrid model. I don't think I've heard of that before. That's really cool. What I was going to ask next. What would you like dancers, choreographers, artistic directors to know about physically inclusive dance? How can they help? How can they support? How can they be part of making dance for everyone, no matter what their bodies are, no matter what their bodies can do?
I would say getting training in this type of work and making sure that training is coming from someone in the community, so that they're able to really dive into their own practices, since there's no one model for this type of work. It's really dependent on what you do and what your practice is, but how can you expand that to include more, and then just kind of being always willing to learn and fail and learn again kind of thing. And bit by bit, you'll reach even more folks, either as audience members or as artists in your company.
Amazing. Do you have any recommendations for those trainings, people you know that you would recommend, or just do a Google search?
Always Google. I mean, I know Access Dance does teacher training.
Nice.
Others in the community do like independent consulting work. So I think just kind of reaching out to those you might know or not know, and just seeing where the resources are. Because even if it's not offered through that person, they can probably know someone who can.
Yeah, and that's an interesting question itself. It's like, who do you know who works in this space? And if you don't know anyone, well, maybe you can try to know someone, right? Because it's a whole other perspective. Like, I know working with you, it opened my eyes to so much I wasn't aware of in dance and just like in the world. So that's wonderful. How can we support, right? How can we support your company? How can we support physically inclusive dance? What can we do?
Yeah, you can always check out our socials, like at Abilities Dance Class, and on Facebook and Instagram to see what we're up to, and then support that by attending or watching or sharing with folks, and then donating is always the best way, but not the only way, but donating so that we can continue to do that work.
Yeah, and donate somewhere, because arts organizations like really need it right now. As of yet, the government has not stepped up, and the sector could collapse. So take an online dance class, send a donation to the company, do what you can do. I'm just gonna throw that out there for everyone.
Exactly.
Probably required, but
I mean, the arts have gotten us through during this quarantine time, so then just imagine what happens when there's no new music being made or shows happening or whatever it might be. So
yeah. I think I saw on Facebook, it just like really resonated with me. It was months ago, but I'm just still thinking of it. Imagine spending months without Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, any books, any music, anything like that, and then try to tell us the arts don't matter. And I was like, right there, boom.
Exactly. So important. So
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's all I have. Any parting words of wisdom or such you'd like to share with our audience?
Just continue learning about our work, about others in this field, or even just a completely new aspects of dance or art in general that you might not be familiar with, and continue supporting artists from all different sorts of backgrounds, so that all of our stories can continue to be told.
Everyone's story is being told. Snap, snap, snaps. And always learning. Keep learning. Right?
Exactly.
That's the fun part about this work, I think, is there's always something new to create, to learn, someone new to meet, something new to explore, to just part of why I love it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We will let you go. You're a busy lady. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And we will talk soon. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Please remember to like and subscribe, and we will be back with another episode next week. Bye, y'all.